Good evening and welcome to CYC News for the 30th of July 2017, the 23rd of Abib, 17:33 AM. I'm Justine Twadros, and in today's headlines, Putin regrets deteriorating US-Russia ties and blames anti-Russia hysteria. Wildfires hit French Riviera and thousands are evacuated. Israeli embassy attacks over furniture delivery deadlines. Qatar says embargoing nations behind news agency hack. US sanctions 13 Venezuelans associated with Maduro. Unprecedented outbreaks of dengue fever plague Sri Lanka. And Novak Djokovic to sit out the remaining 2017 season due to an elbow injury. But first to the controversial issues between America and Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin has stated that he very much regrets the worsening of relations between Russia and the United States. Putin said at a news conference in Savonlinna, Finland, "It's a great pity that Russian-American relations are being sacrificed to this domestic, internal American issue. What we are seeing in the US is merely an anti-Russia hysteria." It was said in response to a question from CNN about the state of the relationship in light of the investigation in the US Congress into allegations of Russian election meddling and possible tightening of sanctions. Putin stated, "The election of the US president, it is not our business and it is not up to us to assess what he does in this very senior post. That's up to the US public. As far as the investigation is concerned, I don't actually think it is an investigation, because an investigation implies a full study and analysis of the situation. What we see is merely a growth of anti-Russian hysteria for domestic policies between President Trump and his political opponents, so it's an internal problem." Over to France, where parts of the French Riviera were evacuated late Tuesday and into Wednesday, as forest fires burned swaths of land and threatened thousands of people, according to local police. More than 10,000 residents and tourists were moved after a forest fire started near the coastal commune of Bormes-les-Mimosas, around 40 kilometers, nearly 25 miles from Toulon, one of the country's southernmost towns. Sunbathers lounging on the beach near Saint-Tropez looked on as wildfire raged nearby. Children played in the sand while others snapped pictures on their phones as flames engulfed pine trees and sent plumes of black smoke billowing overhead. A combination of strong winds, high temperatures and a lack of rain have fueled the fires, which took hold in the French Riviera and on the island of Corsica, off the southern French coast. Similar conditions have sparked blazes in Portugal and Italy. Over 100 firefighting operations have been launched since the blazes broke out, with planes flying over the Bormes area since early Wednesday morning, dropping water bombs on the wildfires. The prefectures of Var said in a statement around 3,000 campers were amongst those evacuated from Bormes, Lalonde and Lavandou. Many ended up sleeping on the beach at Cap Benut, a rocky peninsula in Bormes-les-Mimosas, as smoke rose in the distance. Metinu Dani, a 23-year-old French designer who has been coming to the area for vacation since he was a child, says he's never seen fires like this. Late July and August are when many French residents head out on holiday and visit the Riviera, or the Côte d'Azur, as the Riviera is known in French. In Londes-les-Marais, fires began to burn just before 11 p.m. local time, and despite the dispatch of 540 firefighters, have not yet been brought under control. The areas of Corsica, Valmer, south of the famed resort of Saint-Tropez, and Artigues, east of the regional pub of Aix-en-Provence, says hundreds of hectares of land burned, but those blazes are under control. A total of 9 firefighters working on those 2 fires were injured. In all, more than 4,000 firefighters and soldiers have been deployed to the region, according to France's Interior Minister. President Emmanuel Macron shared his support for the firefighters battling the blazes. In Jordan, the shootings at the Israeli embassy in Amman over the weekend was the result of an argument over furniture delivery deadlines. According to Jordan's public security directorate, a Jordanian carpenter attacked and wounded an Israeli security guard following an argument on Sunday. The guard then shot the Jordanian worker and the Jordanian landlord standing next to him. The Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs said on Monday that the carpenter, who was in the embassy compound for a routine furniture replacement, attacked the security official from behind by stabbing him with a screwdriver. Israel said the security official was slightly wounded but defended himself. The two Jordanian men later died in hospital. In other news, Qatari security officials have confirmed the Gulf nations were behind the hacking of Qatar's official news agency in May, planting false stories that sparked a diplomatic standoff and embargo. A short video screened at a press conference in Qatar's capital asserted the IP addresses responsible for the hacking came from one of the siege's countries, without specifying which nation. Lieutenant Colonel Ali Mohammed Al-Mahandi, head of the investigation committee, confirmed those IP addresses were located in the United Arab Emirates. The Washington Post reported earlier this week that the United Arab Emirates orchestrated the hack, citing US intelligence officials. The United Arab Emirates has firmly denied those allegations, and CNN has been unable to verify the claims in the Post article. The Middle East was plunged into one of its worst diplomatic crises in decades last month when the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Saudi Arabia and Bahrain announced that they would be cutting ties to Qatar over its alleged support of terrorism. They were responsible to online remarks by Qatar's leader, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, in which he called Iran a key revival of Saudi Arabia's an Islamic power and described Qatari relations with Israel as good. Qatar has maintained its emir never made the remarks and that hackers planted the quotes. At Thursday's news conference, security officials said an uptick in activity was noted on the state news agency website in the hours before the stories were planted. Officials said the hack was coordinated and information was disseminated on the news agency and the government's social media channels. The hack was contained in about 3 hours on May 24th. During that time, the hackers took over the state news agency and social media accounts. The investigators said they would submit their findings to prosecutors to decide what sort of action should be taken. The Trump administration slapped sanctions on 13 Venezuelans associated with President Nicolas Maduro on Wednesday, days ahead of a controversial vote that may allow him to further consolidate his power. Senior US officials issued another warning. If Maduro goes through with the vote, President Trump would follow up with strong and swift economic action, though they declined to elaborate. One of the major question marks around US sanctions is whether Trump would impose a ban on Venezuelan oil exports to the United States. Oil in Venezuela, our only source of income, and some believe banning it is one of the few measures to really force Maduro to change his ways. Administration officials said all options are on the table but declined to comment specifically about oil. Some are concerned oil sanctions could worsen severe shortage of food and medicine in Venezuela or separately cause US gas prices to rise. It's the third time Trump has slapped sanctions on Venezuelan officials. On Sunday, Maduro is set to hold a vote that critics say could further erode democracy in Venezuela. If it goes through, Maduro could replace the current national embassy with an entirely new institution filled with his supporters. He could then rewrite the constitution to his liking, his main aim. One senior administration official said Maduro has led his country down to the path of dictatorship, and now he wishes to throw out the constitution itself. In health news, Sri Lanka is facing an unprecedented outbreak of deadly dengue fever, with 296 deaths recorded and over 100,000 cases reported in 2017 alone, according to the Red Cross. The International Aid Organization, formerly known as the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, is increasing its emergency assistance across Sri Lanka to help contain the spread of the mosquito-borne disease, a press release says. As many as 103,000 cases have been reported in the island nation this year, almost twice as many as were reported in all of 2016, and more than 2.3 times higher than the average number of cases for the same period between 2010 and 2016. Hospitals across the country are at breaking point have been forced to turn away patients suffering from the disease as they struggle with the intake. Particularly hard hit is the country's western province, which accounts for almost half of Sri Lanka's infections. More than 1,190 army personnel have been deployed in response to the outbreak. The spread of the deadly viral disease is attributed to heavy monsoon rains, piles of rain-soaking garbage, standing pools of water, and other mosquito larvae breeding grounds, according to the World Health Organization. Gerhard Testure, IFRC's operations manager in Sri Lanka, says that more than half of the country's districts have been affected by heavy rains and flooding, and impoverished areas are most at risk. He says dengue tends to seek out the poor who live in densely populated places where sanitation is inadequate, rubbish piles up, water pools and mosquitoes thrive. And in the sport, 12-time Grand Slam champion Novak Djokovic has decided not to play again during the 2017 season due to a long-standing elbow injury. His decision means he will miss the first major tournament of his career next month, US Open, which starts at Flushing Meadows on August 28. The world number 4, who won the US Open in 2011 and 2015, hasn't trained since his shock withdrawal from Wimbledon quarterfinals. 30-year-old Djokovic said in a video post on his Facebook page, "After a year and a half of carrying an elbow injury, I've decided to not play a competition for the rest of 2017. All the doctors I've consulted and all the specialists I have visited in Serbia and all over the world have agreed that this injury requires rest." Djokovic's absence from the US Open ends a run of 51 consecutive appearances at Grand Slam tournaments, which stretches back to his first major, the 2005 Australian Open. Only Feliciano Lopez, 62, and Fernando Verdasco, 57, are the longest streaks, Djokovic says. "It's a new experience for me, new circumstances. I'm trying to look at it from a brighter side. I have time where I can dedicate myself to healing and building up my body and focusing on certain aspects and elements of my game, which I never had time to work on." Djokovic receives medical attention on a court during his 4th round match against Adrian Manario at Wimbledon. And that's all for CYC News, and a reminder that you can watch the news bulletin again throughout the week on YouTube. I'm Yasin Swadros from the CYC studios in Sydney, Australia. Have a good night.